In the Vatican archive, under the Codex Vaticanus Latinus 5632, is stored a manuscript that is the personal diary of the papal Master of Ceremonies, Johann Burchard, known in historiography as the Liber Notarum. An entry dated October 31, 1501, contains a detailed description of an event that took place in the private chambers of Cesare Borgia in the Apostolic Palace. According to the Latin text of the document, 50 famous courtesans of Rome were brought to an evening banquet. After the meal concluded, a procedure followed for gathering chestnuts that had been scattered across the candlesticks and floor, with subsequent awards of silk tunics and shoes from the papal stores being presented. The event was personally attended by Pope Alexander VI, his son Cesare Borgia, and his daughter Lucrezia Borgia. This concise protocol report, composed by a high-ranking curial official, became the starting point for a massive information campaign in European history known as the Chestnut Banquet. Before we proceed to a detailed source study and institutional analysis of these documents, subscribe to the channel and like the video. This helps our project develop and regularly release in-depth historical investigations. For an objective understanding of the mechanics of what transpired, it is necessary to abandon moralizing clichés and apply the method of an institutional audit of the papal states at the turn of the 15th and 16th centuries. By 1501, the Holy See, under the management of Alexander VI, in the secular world, Rodrigo Borgia, elected in the conclave of 1492, had implemented a model of rigid state centralization. The main task of the pontificate was to subdue the semi-independent signories of Romagna and to physically suppress the opposition of the Roman baronial families before they could form an alliance with external powers. The instrument for implementing this strategy was Cesare Borgia, who resigned his cardinalate in 1498 and was appointed gonfalonier of the Church and captain general of the papal troops. Funding Cesare Borgia's military campaigns required an unprecedented mobilization of funds. The Vatican's central financial body, the Apostolic Camera, under the leadership of the Cardinal Camerlengo, switched to a regime of aggressive capital attraction. In 1500 and 1501, the primary source of treasury replenishment became the institutionalized sale of church benefices and the creation of new curial offices. In the autumn of 1500, the pontiff created 12 new cardinal vacancies, each of which was sold for sums ranging from 10,000 to 25,000 gold ducats. The total income from this single transaction exceeded 200,000 ducats, which allowed for the hiring of 5,000 Swiss and Gascon mercenaries for the sieges of Faenza and Pesaro. Parallel to the financial expansion, a large-scale operation for the seizure of landed property was conducted. Through papal bulls from 1500 and 1501, the land holdings of the Colonna, Savelli, and Caetani families were declared confiscated in favor of the Holy See under the pretext of feudal treason. The confiscated territories were transferred to junior members of the Borgia family or sold at auction to cover the current debts of the military campaign. Thus, in 1501, the Apostolic Palace functioned not as a religious residence, but as a closed financial military headquarters, where strategic decision-making was combined with strict control over information flows. The mechanics of the closed Borgia court relied on a strict hierarchy and a system of personal loyalty. The operational security in Rome and beyond was entrusted to Michelotto Corella, a Spanish condottiere who held the post of special agent for Cesare Borgia. Corella led an operational group responsible for special security, counterintelligence, and the elimination of political opponents. Access to the private chambers of the Apostolic Palace was regulated through a system of written permits, authorized by the pontiff's personal secretaries. The events of October 31, 1501, unfolded under heightened security measures. Additional guards from the Papal Guard were posted around the perimeter of Vatican Hill. All entrances to the Apostolic Palace were blocked by Cesare Borgia's personal security detail. The involvement of 50 courtesans in the closed event had a clear logistical and social structure behind it. In early 16th century Rome, the highest category of courtesans, cortigiane oneste, formed a distinct social stratum closely linked to the curial and diplomatic elite. They were highly educated, participated in diplomatic receptions, and were regularly engaged to serve at both official and private events for the highest clergy. The transportation of guests to the Apostolic Palace on October 31, 1501, was handled by Cesare Borgia's trusted agents. The expense ledgers of the Apostolic Chamber for October and November 1501 contain entries allocating funds for extraordinary representational expenses, which were processed under the line item for personal disbursements by the Captain General. The distribution of gifts, such as silk tunics and shoes from the papal wardrobes, was a standard practice during the Renaissance era for demonstrating monarchical generosity and the ruler's material superiority over subjects and foreign observers. A critical analysis of the sources requires a deep study of the personality of Johann Burchard and the circumstances surrounding the compilation of his diary. Burchard, a native of Strasbourg, held the post of Master of Pontifical Ceremonies of the Vatican from 1483 until his death in 1506. His Liber Notarum is a professional journal in which he recorded, day by day, information on liturgical procedures, diplomatic receptions, the pontiff's movements, and the slightest breaches of curial etiquette. Burchard was known for his pedantry and extreme bureaucratic formalism. He held a clear dislike for the Spanish entourage of Alexander VI. However, his position in the Curia and his memoiristic discipline preclude outright fabrication in the basic facts. Nevertheless, a detailed paleographic and textual analysis of the entry dated October 31, 1501, shows that Burchard was not personally present in Cesare Borgia's private apartments throughout the entire evening. The status of the Master of Ceremonies obligated him to oversee official public ceremonies, whereas closed banquets hosted by the pontiff's son fell outside his direct jurisdictional duties. Consequently, Burchard compiled this fragment based on reports from papal servants and security officers to which he had access as the head of the ceremonial apparatus. This explains the dry, almost protocolar nature of the description, which lacks emotional assessments, but records the external sequence of events. To verify Burchard's information, it is necessary to consult the diplomatic correspondence of ambassadors accredited to the Vatican. The Venetian envoy Antonio Justinian, in his dispatches to the Council of Ten, dated November 1st and November 3rd, 1501, mentions a nighttime celebration in the Apostolic Palace. However, Justinian shifts the emphasis to the presence of foreign diplomats and the political context of the evening. During those days, the plenipotentiary representatives of the Duke of Ferrara, Ercole I d'Este, were in Rome. The banquet on October 31, 1501, took place exactly 14 days after the signing of the marriage contract on October 17, 1501, between Lucrezia Borgia and the heir to the Ferrarese throne, Alfonso I d'Este. The diplomatic report of the Florentine ambassador Francesco Pepelli from November 2nd, 1501, directly links the festive events in the Vatican to the success of the Ferrara negotiations. The marriage alliance with the House of D'Este represented the greatest diplomatic victory of Alexander VI. According to the treaty's terms, Ferrara paid a dowry of 100,000 gold ducats in cash and transferred important territories in Romagna to the Vatican, in return receiving a reduction of its annual vassal tribute to the Holy See from 4,000 to 100 ducats. In the context of these large-scale geopolitical transactions, the banquet of October 31st, 1501, was a closed celebration of the victory of the Borgia diplomatic apparatus, organized by Cesare for a narrow circle of negotiation participants and senior officers of the papal army. How, then, did the tradition of interpreting this evening as an extreme manifestation of moral decay arise? The answer lies in an analysis of the information war waged against Pope Alexander VI. The main center for the production of anti-papal materials was the cardinal opposition led by Giuliano della Rovere, the future Pope Julius II. Living in exile in France, della Rovere formed a network of agents and printing houses to discredit the Vatican before European monarchs. In the autumn of 1501, an anonymous pamphlet titled Letter to Silvio Savelli was printed in Cologne, instantly disseminated in hundreds of handwritten and printed copies throughout the courts of Europe. In the letter to Silvio Savelli, the real episode involving the gathering of chestnuts and the distribution of gifts on October 31st, 1501, was subjected to significant literary elaboration. The author of the libel added details about mass competitions and blasphemous rituals, presenting the events as evidence of the complete desecration of the Holy See. The goal of this publication was to disrupt the marriage alliance with Ferrara and to convince Emperor Maximilian I and King Ferdinand II of Spain of the necessity of convening an ecumenical council to depose Alexander VI on charges of simony and moral unfitness. The Republic of Venice, fearing the strengthening of the Papal States in Romagna, also actively joined in spreading this information. The renowned Venetian chronicler Marino Sanuto, in his Diarii for November 1501, provides a retelling of the Cologne pamphlet, presenting it as reports from his own intelligence. A comparison of Sanuto's texts and the pamphlet Letter to Silvio Savelli shows identical phrasing, proving the use of a single source of disinformation. Thus, what became fixed in historical memory is not so much the fact of the banquet on October 31st, 1501, but rather its propagandistic interpretation, created by the political opponents of the Borgias. Simultaneously with the information warfare, in the autumn of 1501, the Vatican demonstrated the highest efficiency in the field of diplomatic cryptographic service and counterintelligence. For correspondence with legates and diplomatic representatives in Paris and Madrid, the Secretariat of Alexander VI used complex monoalphabetic ciphers employing nulls, nullae, which had no semantic meaning. The State Archive of Modena preserves the encrypted correspondence of Cesare Borgia with his agent in Ferrara, Ercole Bentivoglio, dating from October and November 1501. The interception of these letters by Milanese and Venetian intelligence at postal stations between Rome and Bologna yielded no results. Decryption performed by Milanese cryptographers in 1502 showed that the texts discussed exclusively financial transactions, the purchase of gunpowder in Venice, and the movements of the Condottiero Vitellozzo Vitelli's troops, with no mentions of internal court events. The mechanics of acquiring and retaining power in the papal curia under the Borgias were built on a combination of clan solidarity and institutional fear. All key administrative posts, from the keeper of the Castel Sant'Angelo archives to the prefect of the papal post, were held by natives of Valencia and Catalonia. This Catalan clan completely isolated the Italian aristocracy from decision-making. Control over secret documentation was exercised through the pontiff's trusted secretaries, including Francesco Borgia, Bishop of Teano, and Adriano Castellesi, who headed the secret chancery. Any information leaks were punished with ruthless severity. In 1500, the papal secretary Pedro Calderón, accused of passing information to the Venetian embassy, was subjected to capital punishment. His body was retrieved from the Tiber on February 14, 1500. Officers of Michelotto Corella conducted a series of searches in the homes of notaries of the Apostolic Chancery, seizing all unofficial copies of papal bulls and financial reports. These measures created an atmosphere of absolute secrecy around the internal life of the Apostolic Palace, which, in turn, contributed to the birth of the most fantastic rumors among the population of Rome. An analysis of the judicial inquiries conducted after the demise of the Borgia dynasty allows for a detailed examination of the methods used by the investigative bodies of the Holy See. In 1504 and 1505, on the initiative of Pope Julius II, a special cardinal commission was formed under the leadership of Cardinal Antonio Pallavicini to investigate the crimes of Alexander VI's pontificate. The Vatican's secret archives contain the interrogation protocols of former servants of Cesare Borgia, who were arrested in the Castel Sant'Angelo. A study of these protocols shows that the investigators were less interested in moral transgressions than in the search for hidden financial assets. Testimony was extracted from the accused using water torture and the strappado, corda. Under the influence of these torments, former treasurers and stewards of Cesare Borgia signed protocols confirming any accusation put forth by the prosecution, including the organization of desecrations of the Apostolic Palace and the concealment of 300,000 gold ducats. However, a subsequent cross-check of this testimony against the surviving ledgers of the Apostolic Chamber revealed that the specified sums had not been stolen, but were used to pay for artillery supplies from France and to pay the salaries of the papal garrisons in Imola and Forli. A critical audit of the reasons for the collapse of the Borgia political system proves that the structure ceased to exist not as a result of internal conspiracies or discredit due to the banquet of chestnuts, but because of a fatal coincidence of temporal and biological factors. On August 6, 1503, Pope Alexander VI and Cesare Borgia simultaneously fell gravely ill after attending a dinner at the country villa of Cardinal Adriano Castellesi. The 16th-century historiography was dominated by the version of poisoning by Cantarella poison, allegedly prepared for the villa's owner. However, modern medical and climatological analysis indicates that both fell victim to an outbreak of malignant Roman malaria, Plasmodium falciparum, accompanied by a severe fever in August 1503. On August 18, 1503, the demise of Pope Alexander VI occurred. At this critical moment, Cesare Borgia was in a state of severe intoxication and could not personally lead the papal troops. During the critical 72 hours following the pontiff's death, a power vacuum emerged in the Vatican. Michelotto Corella attempted to blockade the Vatican Hill and seize the treasury of the Apostolic Chamber. However, the College of Cardinals, relying on the troops of the Orsini barons, forced Borgia's troops to leave Rome. The absence of a single center of control led to the instantaneous collapse of the state organism that had been built over 11 years. Cesare Borgia's hired captains, deprived of centralized payments from the Vatican, terminated their contracts. The cities of Romagna, Rimini, Pesaro, Cesena, within a few weeks restored the rule of their former dynasties or declared their submission to the Venetian Republic. Cesare Borgia's archive, located in the Castel Sant'Angelo, was partially looted by agents of Cardinal della Rovere, while the most valuable cipher books and payment ledgers were destroyed by Cesare's personal secretary, Agapito Geraldini, to prevent the prosecution of the clan's supporters. The documentary epilogue of the Borgia dynasty's fall is recorded in the official inventory acts drawn up by notaries of the Apostolic Chamber on December 1, 1503, and January 1, 1504. On the orders of the new Pope Julius II, a full audit was conducted of Cesare Borgia's personal storerooms in the Vatican. According to the inventory, coins, precious vessels, gold embroidery, and jewelry, totaling 120,000 gold ducats, were seized for the papal treasury, along with a unique collection of ancient gems and manuscripts, including copies of works by Titus Livy and Cicero. The Borgia private apartments in the Vatican, known as the Appartamento Borgia, and frescoed by the master Pinturicchio, were sealed by the personal order of Julius II. The minutes of the consistory meeting on November 26, 1503, record the words of Julius II, who declared that he refused to live in rooms where every square meter was a reminder of the excesses of the previous pontificate. The apartments remained sealed for over 300 years and were opened to the public only at the end of the 19th century under Pope Leo XIII. This decision by Julius II ensured the perfect preservation of Pinturicchio's frescoes, but simultaneously forever cemented these rooms' grim status as a crime scene. The legal legacy of the Borgia era had a fundamental influence on the transformation of the institution of the papacy. On January 14, 1505, Pope Julius II promulgated the bull Cum Tam Divino, which became a key document of early modern canon law. The bull proclaimed that any election of a Roman pontiff conducted through simony or the transfer of funds and benefices was invalid from the moment of the conclave. The document stripped a pope elected in such a manner of all spiritual and temporal rights, and cardinals involved in the deal faced automatic excommunication and the confiscation of all income. The bull Cum Tam Divino was a direct institutional response to the 1492 conclave, during which Rodrigo Borgia acquired the papal tiara by paying enormous sums to Cardinal Ascanio Sforza and his supporters. The informational trace of the events of October 31, 1501, had far-reaching consequences for the history of European civilization. In 1517, with the start of the Reformation in Germany, Martin Luther and his associates turned the story of the Chestnut Banquet into a key element of anti-papal propaganda. In the polemical writings of Ulrich von Hutten and Philip Melanchthon, excerpts from published pamphlets of 1501 and fragments of Burchard's diary were cited as irrefutable proof that the Vatican had lost its sacred status and had turned into Babylon. Thus, a private event that took place on October 31, 1501, in the closed quarters of the Apostolic Palace and recorded by the dry pen of the Supreme Ceremoniere Johann Burchard, traveled a path from a closed celebration of a diplomatic victory to a global historiographic myth. A detailed study of archival sources, financial registers of the Camera Apostolica, and diplomatic dispatches allows this episode to be cleansed of centuries of accumulated political disinformation. In the final analysis, what unfolds before us is the harsh history of the struggle to create a centralized state in Renaissance Italy, where institutional violence, financial expansion, diplomatic marriages, and private festivities were merely elements of a unified state mechanics of holding power.